Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for another match preview. Tomorrow we take on Birmingham in the Championship for an evening kickoff. I believe it's on Sky, so we've not got to watch iFollow, which is just quite pleasing. Almost as pleasing as Norwich City beating Rotherham in the 95th minute because of a penalty that Emi Buendia has cleverly won, and Jordan Hugill has just sort of strolled up to the ball and rolled it into the net. Very satisfying stuff, very sweet stuff, very pleasing stuff. I'm sure Daniel Farke and the players have enjoyed it just as much as us. It's just pleasing that Norwich City have won a game of football at this point. There are plenty of positives to take from that performance, which I'm going to get into after my lineup, and we're also going to go into a little bit more detail about the opposition, which is something that I want to improve on personally, because I was watching a couple of the previews back just to see sort of what we can do differently, how we can improve them, and I think sort of going into a little bit more detail about the opposition should prove a useful exercise for both me and you. But as ever, we're going to kick off with the lineup. I'm just going to stick it up next to me now because it's the exact same as the Rotherham game. Daniel Farke very rarely changes a winning side, does he? Which is fair enough sometimes. Usually when you want to build momentum as a club, even if it's a scrappy win like Norwich's was, you've got to sort of build some sort of momentum, and the key to that is playing the same players. Simple as that, really, isn't it? So just to run over the lineup, it's Tim Krul in goal, Max Aarons, Grant Hanley, Ben Gibson, Xavi Quintilla, Ollie Skipp, Lucas Rupp, Emi Buendia, Marco Stiepermann, Adam Eder, and Jordan Hugill. Now, that lineup sort of surprised me when it came out against Rotherham. Adam Eder on the left wing, I don't really know how I felt about that. He had a good couple of chances against Rotherham, as did Marco Stiepermann. Jesus Christ, you can tell I've not made a video for a couple of weeks. But yeah, it seemed to work okay, didn't it? He's obviously very quick, very powerful, and I think the intention behind that was to match up to the physicality of Rotherham, which arguably is quite smart from Daniel Farke. And I said before the game on the Pinkin on Terrace Talk with Connor and a Rotherham fan called Josh, that I wanted Daniel Farke to be a bit smarter. Perhaps this is evidence of that for me. But yeah, as I said earlier, there are plenty of positives to take from that game, and the two that I want to take are, one, the mentality, and two, just the fact Norwich City have won a game. And now when I say mentality, just to go back to point number one, I mean Norwich City have gone down due to an early goal because of a poor ball from Tim Krul, who obviously made up for his error. They've conceded a penalty, and at half-time it was 1-0, wasn't it? And I think we're all just sort of sat there like, right, what's going on at this point then? Something needs to change. And for me, I think Norwich just showed a lot of mental resilience. They continue to try and play their football, and as a result of that, the first goal came. It was a very fluid move from Norwich City. It was something that you would have expected to have seen in the 18-19 season. I won't call it a counter-attack, but it was just a really well-built move from the back. I think it was about 6 passes before the cross from Max Aarons. And then I'm sort of saddened for Jordan Hugill that he's not on the end of that, because that would have been the perfect sort of opening goal for Norwich City. Although you can argue a 95th minute penalty is as well. But it's just a brilliant team move, and it was really pleasing for me to see that Norwich City are still capable of that, because for me the questions that I was asking of Daniel Farke were, are you sort of capable of replicating 18-19 to an extent in terms of this sort of fluid football? And just from that one move alone, yeah, we are. It's just about finding consistency. And I said on Twitter that, I saw on Twitter, that people were questioning sort of the identity of Norwich and that they'd lost it a little bit. I don't think they have. I think the execution just hasn't been brilliant. I think the intention is definitely still there to play sort of fluid football where we utilise the channels. Max Aarons' crossing is massively improving. Xavi Quintilla is already a well-established crosser of the ball. I think the intention is still there. It's just about the two jobs that Daniel Farke has to do, which are two massive jobs, and you can argue one's harder than the other. One being sort of bedding in these new players into Norwich City, which he's usually pretty good at, in my opinion. But then the other one, which I'd argue is actually more difficult, is the fact that he's got to sort of recover the players who are playing now, who were playing last season. He's got to sort of change their mentality from a player who's lost so many games in a row to a player who now needs to pick themselves up and go again. But not only go again, but challenge for the title, because that's what everyone's expecting of Norwich City. Now, I know internal expectations at the club will be top 6, because in the AGM they said top 26, and I think that technically means that Norwich City could finish 6th and not get promoted, and that would be classed as a successful season. So we know that Daniel Farke won't be putting too much pressure on his players, but the outside pressure via social media, of course, only as opposed to being in the stadium, is definitely there, and the players will definitely be feeling it. And it's Daniel Farke's job to sort of get the best out of them. So I think in terms of picking up a result against Rotherham, that's why it's such a positive thing. That is a sign that the mentality is improving. And when you bring players like Ben Gibson and Jordan Hugill in, who already seem fairly mentally strong, especially the scene sort of after the game, where you don't often see sort of Norwich players too loud after a game, but then players were very vocal, weren't they? And Jordan Hugill speaking after the game to the guy who does the interviews with Norwich, saying sort of being so confident, it's really pleasing, isn't it? And I think that'll help these players who were playing last season sort of turn around and go, right, yeah, we're up for this and we're going to do it. But they're my positives from Rotherham. I think it was a fairly boring game, wasn't it? From what I've read and what I've been told and what I've seen, but there were plenty of things to build on. Now, the thing is, right, in football, you'll hear that's something to build on, and people will say that, for example, when a team's played really well and they've won a game, great, yep, build on that, but they'll also say it when a team's picked up a scrappy 1-0 and sort of not really implemented themselves in the game, and they'll say there's something to build on. In terms of how sort of credible the idea of something to build on, I keep saying that, it's starting to annoy me now, it's very credible, because that one goal alone for me is literally something to build on. And again, I've said it time and time again, it's literally just about consistency. And I think in terms of building the momentum, as I said earlier, playing the same 11 is how you build consistency, whether you like it or not. Daniel Farke, again, as I said, never changes a winning team. Very rarely a manager changes a winning team, but it's all about building momentum, and I think Norwich City can do that against Birmingham. But they're my sort of thoughts on Norwich City at the moment. I think this is a great chance for them to, again, impose themselves on a team like Birmingham, who are definitely going to come and sort of sit back. I think a lot of teams are, apart from our promotion rivals, who perhaps still will, but this is another chance for Norwich City to learn a lesson and impose themselves on a game. They've got to be brave. We need more of the first goal against Rotherham, which is this passing that's just, as I said, it's very brave, it's very fluid, it's very Norwich City, isn't it, at the moment, of course, and I want to see that a few times, and there is a real opportunity for Norwich City to score a few goals in this game, because if you look at the Rotherham one, I think between them, Aitor and Stiepermann had some really good chances. I know Stiepermann scored an offside goal as well, but there are plenty of chances to score, plenty of goals, and I do hope Jordan Hugill scores another goal as well, of course. And we know one thing, which is that this team is going to work hard. But they're my thoughts in terms of a Norwich City perspective. To look at Birmingham now, I've got some things to my computer here which I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to keep looking over here, and we're just going to have to get used to that. I'm going to pop them on the screen next to me as well. So in terms of signings, they appointed Aitor Karanka, who is a manager who we have lots of sort of history with, playing against, of course. We played against him in the playoff final, and twice in that season, of course, where they thumped us and then they just about edged us at Carrow Road. I'll never forget that. A really painful game, of course. But yeah, they appointed him, a very decent manager, knows the division incredibly well. He's been promoted from it. As I said, he got to a playoff final. I think he did okay with Forest, and then the whole Forest management situation is just a weird thing. The ownership's weird there, isn't it? I'm sure we can agree on that. But they also signed Neil Etheridge, who is a very decent Championship goalkeeper. Now, I'm not going to go through all their signings, but these are just sort of the signings that caught my eye. Neil Etheridge, who I think is a decent keeper. I've not seen him for a while, but I remember him being very solid at Cardiff. They signed Scott Hogan permanently. He was on loan the previous season. A very Championship name, isn't he, Scott Hogan? I don't really know what he does. I know he's quite quick, but he doesn't... Christ, look, he's going to score against us tomorrow now, I know, just because I've said this, but he doesn't seem to score that many goals. He hasn't got a brilliant goal-scoring record, so I can imagine maybe there'd be a 2 up front for that sort of intention anyway. George Friend, a man that Aitor Karanka knows incredibly well, a man that knows the Championship incredibly well as well. He was there for the playoff final and the promotion season and the relegation season from the Premier League. Adam Clayton as well, a player who knows the Championship incredibly well. I think is actually quite decent and could be quite important for them. And in terms of a sort of a more youthful signing, they've got Jonathan Lecco from West Brom, who I believe cost them about £1 million. I think he'll definitely be having a point to prove. And an interesting thing that I noted as well in terms of the finances of Birmingham is that 9 of their permanent signings in the window were free transfers. And I think Birmingham have always been sort of well known for not having the best sort of state of finances, if you can phrase it like that, but we all know what I mean. So I think that's a very interesting thing. It's a bit of one of them saves on FM, you know, where you pick a really low team and they've got no budget, so you've just got to pull a bunch of freebies out of the bag. And I think in terms of the actual signings they've made, they look fairly decent. George Friend, I think, could be a good player for them. I've not seen him for a couple of years now, but he is sort of literally a championship veteran, and I think he'll be important for sort of the mentality of Birmingham. Speaking about mentality in terms of Birmingham, they've actually had a decent start to the season. Now, I could be completely wrong here because I don't watch them week in, week out, and I'm not a Birmingham fan, but from my view, they actually have had a decent start. On the opening day, they beat Brentford 1-0, and everyone's tipping Brentford to go up. They've just lost Ben Rama, of course, and they lost Ollie Watkins. Ollie Watkins as well, by the way, what a hell of a player, because I questioned whether he'd be able to make the step up, but he's banged a hat-trick against Liverpool in that utterly bizarre game, which I actually missed because of the Rivera boys. We were filming the podcast at the time. But yeah, they beat Brentford, which was massive for them. And then from then, they drew 3 games, which included Sheffield Wednesday, Swansea, and Stoke, I believe, or Swansea, Stoke and Rotherham, sorry, and they lost to Sheffield Wednesday. But, you know, Swansea are a team who played decent football. Stoke, again, I think Ben Bloom predicted them to get playoffs because they were so good towards the end of last season under Michael O'Neill, I believe his name is. And we know how sort of good Rotherham can be and how sort of solid they are. So I think picking up points against them teams are decent. Losing to Sheffield Wednesday isn't brilliant, but to win 1, draw 3 and lose 1, considering that when football came back after the lockdown, they didn't win a game. So the fact that Aitor Karanka has come in, and I believe the phrase I'm going to use is the right one, which is I think he sort of steadied the ship. I believe the intention will be to sort of approach a mid-table finish. In terms of actual expectation, I imagine it will be just sort of beat relegation. But I do believe that he seems to be doing a decent job so far. We know that his teams aren't the prettiest to watch, but when you look at a team who were sort of in Birmingham's position, I think the intention is to sort of steady the ship and make sort of relegation something they can forget about and then kick on from. Whether he'll be the right man for that, who knows? Maybe it is finally his time to take a team into the Premier League and keep them there. Will he do that this season? No, he won't. Imagine if they do now. I'd look an absolute idiot, wouldn't I? But that's all we know about Birmingham. I know it's going to be an incredibly tough game. The main thing I take from that is, one, they've got a couple of decent players about. Let's not forget that. I think every team always has them decent players who are always just sort of kicking about, who will, when they fancy it, play really well, which is such an obvious thing to say, which I just didn't need to, but I did anyway. But the main thing I'll take from it is the fact that Aitor Karanka's defensive football could haunt Norwich, to be honest with you. It has done before. And as I said, this is a game where Norwich City are going to have to take it to Birmingham, as opposed to sort of Birmingham sitting back and Norwich sort of dilly-dallying on the ball, much like we saw against Derby. After about 20 minutes, Derby looked really comfortable and then imposed themselves on the game, won the game. Since then, haven't looked great, have they? So hopefully there'll be no sort of smash and grab from Birmingham, but the way to avoid that is by Norwich City really sort of just doing their thing. And to do that, logically, Christ, I'm not a footballer, remember this. Logically, it shouldn't be too difficult. I think it's just about putting a little bit more venom on passes, a bit more sort of oomph, if you know what I mean, because that's the way you get up a football pitch. You do stuff a little bit quicker. I want to see a lot of bravery from the full-backs. We know Max Aarons will do it. We know Quintia will do it. Max Aarons, by the way, looks a level above so far this season, doesn't he? And everyone seems to be pointing out that he's getting frustrated at his own team quite a lot, and sort of visually, which I don't blame him. But the fact that he's still in this team suggests his attitude is good. Pardon me, is good. Because we know what Daniel Farke's like when it comes to that, don't we? Jesus Christ. Todd Cantwell seems to be up for it, according to social media. His social media, that is, of course. So I think we'll very much see a situation where he's sort of drip fed back into the game. But yeah, I really want to see Norwich attack the game, to be honest with you. And I think we will. I think the intention will be that. But whether we do it, for me, these are the games that get you promotion, where a team like Birmingham, who are a team who are going to come and sit back and aren't really that brilliant going forward. I don't think they've scored more than 1 goal in a game so far this season, so that would be very uncommon Norwich, wouldn't it? But this sort of game is the one that sort of gets you promoted from the division. I very much trust Norwich City to do it. We saw against Rotherham, as I said, a good couple of chances created, so I think we can do it. I want to see a lot of Buendia on the ball, because he's just an absolute joy to watch, isn't he? Obviously won the penalty very cleverly. Very Wes Hoolahan of him, might I say. I think that's the exact same position he won one in against Watford when he dived horrendously, but obviously Buendia's wasn't a dive. Thankfully, Ollie Skip is okay following that horrendous red card, which I've somehow not mentioned, but which was just, it was fairly disgraceful. And I saw a few Rotherham fans saying that he went for the ball, but yeah, I just crease. Yeah, a few brain cells were lost trying to sort of fathom why people would justify that not being a red card. But at this point, I'm waffling. I'm very keen to know your thoughts in the comments down below. As ever, leave a like on the video. That'd be awesome. If you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, that would be pretty cool as well. I'd be very, very grateful if you would. Score predictions in the comments down below as well. Of course, I'm not going to go for a score prediction because I'm always wrong, and you can only be wrong so many times before it becomes somewhat painful. But yes, here's the 3 points tomorrow. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.